Fired staff. Maid hired. Imagine the biting cold of a Cambridge, Massachusetts winter in the late 1870s. Inside the hallowed halls of the Harvard College Observatory, the air isn't just cold, it's thick with tension. This isn't a place of quiet, contemplative stargazing. It's a data factory, a frontier of a new kind of astronomy. The director, a man named Edward Charles Pickering, is a force of nature, brilliant, ambitious, but with a notoriously short fuse. He's not just looking at the stars, he's trying to catalog them, to understand their very essence on an industrial scale. His revolutionary new tool, photography. For the first time, astronomers could capture the light of thousands of stars on a single glass plate, creating a permanent record of the cosmos. But this technological leap created a colossal problem, a data deluge. The observatory was drowning in thousands of fragile glass plates, each one a cryptic map of the heavens, covered in tiny, inscrutable black smudges and streaks. The challenge was no longer just about looking through a telescope. It was about deciphering this overwhelming library of light. To tackle this, Pickering had hired a team of male assistants. These were men with formal education, men who were supposed to be the bright minds of their generation. Their job was painstaking, meticulous work to analyze the plates, measure the positions of stars, and, most importantly, classify their spectra, the unique rainbow-like bands of light that act as a star's chemical fingerprint. But the work was tedious, repetitive, and required an almost superhuman level of patience and precision. And Pickering's staff, in his increasingly frustrated view, was failing. They were sloppy. Their calculations were riddled with errors. Their classifications were inconsistent. They lacked the discipline, the sheer grinding focus required for this monumental task. Day after day, Pickering would review their work, his face growing darker with each discovered mistake. The grand vision he had for a definitive map of the stars was being undermined by the very people he paid to build it. The breaking point, as legend has it, was a moment of pure, incandescent rage. After discovering yet another set of carelessly analyzed plates, Pickering exploded. He stormed into the workroom, the air crackling with his fury. He berated his assistants, their academic credentials meaning nothing in the face of their shoddy performance. In a fit of ultimate exasperation, he bellowed a phrase that would echo through the history of science, a phrase dripping with sarcasm and contempt, yet pregnant with prophecy. "My Scottish maid could do a better job." It was meant as the ultimate insult, a declaration that their work was so poor, so lacking in basic diligence, that even an untrained domestic servant, a woman with no formal scientific background, could outperform them. In the rigid, patriarchal society of the 19th century, this was the most dismissive comparison imaginable. It was a statement designed to humiliate. And then the shouting stopped. An idea born from pure anger began to solidify in Pickering's mind. What if it wasn't just an insult? What if it was a solution? He fired them. Not one or two, but the entire male staff responsible for the data analysis. The observatory fell into a shocked silence. The project was now rudderless. But Pickering was a man of impulsive conviction. He went home and made an offer that was as absurd as it was revolutionary. He approached his maid, a Scottish immigrant named Wilhelmina Fleming. Fleming had been in his employ for a few years, running his household with quiet efficiency. She was a single mother, having been abandoned by her husband while pregnant, and had taken the job as a domestic servant out of sheer necessity. She had a good education from her time in Scotland, where she had been a teacher, but in America, with no connections and a thick accent, her options were limited. She was intelligent, organized, and meticulous, qualities she applied to cleaning floors and managing household accounts. Pickering had seen this diligence firsthand. And so, in an act that defied all social and professional norms, he hired her, not as a new maid for the observatory, but to do the very job his university-educated male assistants had failed at. He brought her into the heart of the observatory, sat her down in front of a stack of glass plates, and tasked her with bringing order to the chaos of the cosmos. The genesis of a scientific revolution wasn't a carefully planned experiment. It was a gamble born from a temper tantrum, a spark of anger that was about to illuminate the heavens.
Maid's secret genius. Williamina Fleming's first days at the Harvard College Observatory were anything but glamorous. She wasn't immediately tasked with rewriting the map of the stars. Instead, she was given administrative and clerical duties, the kind of women's work that was deemed acceptable within the scientific establishment. She copied tables of data, performed mathematical computations, and edited the observatory's publications. It was methodical, demanding work, but it was a world away from the intellectual core of astronomical research. Her official title was computer, a term used for the people, mostly women, who performed the laborious calculations that underpinned the science. For many, this would have been the end of the story, a maid who got a slightly better desk job. But Fleming was different. The same precision she had once used to manage a household, she now applied to columns of numbers. The same sharp eye that could spot a speck of dust on a mantelpiece could now spot an anomaly in a sequence of stellar magnitudes. She was quiet, diligent, and, most importantly, she was a keen observer. While the men before her had seen the work as a tedious chore, Fleming saw a puzzle. She was surrounded by the raw data of the universe, and her curiosity was piqued. She would watch the senior astronomers, listen to their discussions, and absorb the language of this new science. Her primary workspace was a small desk with a simple light source, over which she would place the heavy glass photographic plates. Using a magnifying glass, she would lean in, her world shrinking to the few square inches of glass illuminated from below. On these plates, the spectra of stars weren't beautiful rainbows. They were tiny, monochromatic streaks of gray and black, each with a unique pattern of dark lines, like a barcode. These were the Fraunhofer lines, and they held the chemical secrets of each star. The task was to look at this barcode and assign the star to a category. It was like sorting a massive, disorganized library where every book was written in a different, unknown language. The existing system for classification was a chaotic mess. It was based on an alphabetical system developed by earlier astronomers like Angelo Secchi, but as more and more diverse stellar spectra were discovered, new letters were just tacked on, creating a confusing and illogical sequence. It was subjective and inconsistent. Different analysts would often classify the same star differently. It was this very chaos that Fleming's orderly mind began to address. She wasn't just following instructions, she was thinking. She started to notice patterns that everyone else, in their haste or boredom, had missed. She saw that certain types of spectral lines always appear together. She recognized that the seemingly random assortment of letters could be rearranged into a more logical, more elegant sequence. Her lack of formal training, which should have been a disadvantage, became her greatest asset. She wasn't burdened by preconceived notions or the flawed systems of the past. She looked at the data with fresh eyes, guided not by academic dogma, but by pure, unadulterated evidence staring up at her from the glass plate. Her transition from clerk to scientist was gradual, a slow burn of earned trust. It began with her pointing out small errors in the catalog. Then she started suggesting more efficient ways to organize the data. Pickering, her temperamental employer, was no fool. He recognized the sharp intellect and unwavering diligence he had stumbled upon. He started giving her more responsibility, moving her from simple computations to the complex and crucial task of spectral classification itself. It was here that her secret genius truly blossomed. She didn't just apply the old broken system more accurately than the men before her, she began to fundamentally rethink it. She proposed a new approach. Instead of a jumble of letters, she suggested organizing the stars based on a single, clear criterion: the relative strength of the hydrogen absorption lines in their spectra. It was a simple, powerful, and revolutionary idea. It was a system based not on arbitrary letters, but on the intrinsic physics of the stars themselves. The unassuming Maid, hired out of spite, was no longer just a computer. She was becoming an architect of the cosmos.
Block 3. Rewriting Star Map. Wilhelmina Fleming wasn't just tidying up the existing map of the stars, she was redrawing it from first principles, using a new, more powerful language. The challenge she faced was immense. Imagine being handed a library of 10,000 books, all written in different alien languages, and being told to organize them in a way that reveals the story of their civilization. That was the scale of the task. The Henry Draper Catalog, the grand project initiated by Pickering, was meant to be the definitive compendium of stellar spectra, a foundational document for the new science of astrophysics. But a catalog is only as good as its classification system, and the existing one was a broken tool. It was an alphabet soup of categories, A through Q, that lacked any underlying physical meaning. It was like organizing animals by the first letter of their name instead of by species, genus, and family. An aardvark and an antelope would be neighbors, while a wolf and a dog would be miles apart. It was chaos. Fleming's revolutionary insight was to ignore the confusing alphabet and focus on one simple, measurable feature: hydrogen. Hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe, the fundamental building block of stars. She noticed that the dark absorption lines of hydrogen in the stellar spectra, the parts of the star's barcode where hydrogen atoms had absorbed light, varied dramatically in strength. Some stars had thick, prominent hydrogen lines, while others had very faint ones. She proposed a radical new system: classify the stars based on the strength of these lines. Stars with the strongest hydrogen lines were designated A, those with slightly weaker lines B, and so on. This wasn't an arbitrary choice. It was a system rooted in the fundamental physics of the stars. Although the full implications wouldn't be understood until later, this spectral sequence was, in fact, a temperature sequence. The A stars were at the perfect temperature to show off their hydrogen, while hotter and cooler stars had weaker lines for different physical reasons. She had, without fully knowing it, discovered a cosmic thermometer. This new system, which would become known as the Pickering-Fleming system, was elegant, objective, and most importantly, it worked. It transformed the task of classification from a subjective art into a repeatable science. But implementing it required a Herculean effort. Over the course of several years, Fleming personally examined thousands upon thousands of photographic plates. Day in, day out, she would sit at her desk meticulously analyzing the spectral fingerprint of each star. Her work was a monument to human focus and dedication. In the end, she would personally classify 10,351 stars for the first Henry Draper catalog, published in 1890. Her name was not on the cover as an author. That honor went to Pickering, but her mind and her system formed its very backbone. She had single-handedly created the most comprehensive and logically organized stellar database the world had ever seen. Naturally, this radical new map of the heavens, created by a woman with no university degree, a former domestic servant, was met with deep-seated skepticism from the broader scientific community. It was an institution dominated by men who trusted academic pedigrees far more than they trusted empirical results from an unknown source. Who was this Mrs. Fleming to upend a system established by respected astronomers? Her work was initially dismissed in quiet conversations and condescending letters. It was seen as the clerical work of a diligent but intellectually limited assistant. Even her employer, Pickering, had to fight to have her contributions recognized.
He knew he had found a diamond in the rough, but convincing his peers was another matter entirely. They saw a maid. He saw a scientist. They saw a data processor. He saw an architect. Wilhelmina Fleming wasn't just cataloging stars, she was revealing their hidden relationships, creating a new syntax for reading the sky. The resistance was formidable, fueled by the era's deep-seated sexism and classism. But Fleming had an unassailable ally on her side, the data itself. Her map was simply better. It was more consistent, more useful, and it was about to lead to discoveries that no one could ignore.
Block 4. Cosmic revelation confirmed. A revolutionary idea is one thing, proving it is another entirely. For Wilhelmina Fleming, validation didn't come from a single dramatic moment in a packed auditorium. It came gradually, relentlessly, through the sheer, undeniable power of her work. Her classification system was so robust and her analysis so meticulous that it began to do something no system before it could. It revealed the strange and the new. Her rewritten map of the stars wasn't just a neater arrangement. It was a treasure map, and she was the first to find the gold. While poring over the endless parade of stellar spectra, her trained eye became adept at spotting anything out of the ordinary. She was looking for patterns, but she became a master at finding the exceptions, the cosmic oddities that defied simple explanation. These discoveries were the irrefutable proof that her method was not just a filing system, but a powerful tool for discovery. One of the most spectacular confirmations of her genius is now one of the most famous objects in the night sky. In 1888, while examining plate B2312, a photographic exposure of the Orion constellation, she noticed something extraordinary. There, near the bright star Alnitak, was a faint wisp of darkness, an inky black void set against the faint glow of a background nebula. It was a dark, obscuring cloud of dust and gas, shaped uncannily like a knight's chess piece. She had discovered the Horsehead Nebula. At the time, the nature of these dark nebulae was a complete mystery. Many astronomers believed they were simply holes in the fabric of the cosmos, empty patches where there were no stars. Fleming's meticulous cataloging of such objects helped prove that they were, in fact, immense clouds of cold, dense material that blocked the light from behind. She didn't just find a pretty shape. She found a key piece of the puzzle in understanding the life cycle of stars, the very nurseries where new suns are born. Her discoveries kept coming. She had an uncanny knack for spotting variable stars, stars that changed their brightness over time. She discovered hundreds of them, including many of a specific type known as Cepheid variables, which would later be used by Henrietta Leavitt to measure the size of the entire universe. Fleming also discovered novae, stars that suddenly and dramatically increase in brightness. In 1893, she found a nova in the constellation Norma by noticing a new, bright spectrum on a plate that hadn't been there before. But perhaps her most profound discovery was a new star altogether. She identified stars that were incredibly hot and dense, yet strangely dim. These were the first white dwarfs ever discovered. These were the bizarre, crushed remnants of sun-like stars at the end of their lives. She had stumbled upon the graveyards of the cosmos, objects so strange that their physics wouldn't be understood for decades. The ultimate validation was the publication of the Henry Draper Catalog. It was a triumph. Astronomers around the world began using it, and they found that Fleming's classification system worked. It allowed them to compare stars, to see patterns in their distribution, and to ask deeper questions about their evolution. The aha moment was a collective one, a slow dawning realization across the astronomical community that the system developed at Harvard was superior to all others. Independent verification flowed in as other observatories adopted her methods. The sheer utility of her work silenced the skeptics. The map she had drawn was undeniably accurate and profoundly revolutionary. Her system became the foundation for the more detailed Harvard system developed by her successor,
Annie jump cannon. But it was Fleming who laid the cornerstone. The maid who was hired out of anger had forced the world to see the stars not as a random scattering of lights, but as a grand ordered family with a story to tell. And she had taught them all how to read it.
Block 5. Unsung Astronomical Hero. The legacy of Williamina Fleming is written in the very language astronomers use to speak about the stars. Her work was not a footnote in the history of science. It was a foundational chapter. The stellar classification system she developed, refined by Annie Jump Cannon and the other women of the Harvard Observatory, remains the bedrock of modern astrophysics. Every time a scientist discusses a type A star or a type G star like our own sun, they are using the intellectual framework that she built. Her direct, tangible contributions were staggering. In her career, she discovered 10 novae, 59 gaseous nebulae, including the iconic Horsehead Nebula, over 300 variable stars, and the first white dwarf. She personally classified tens of thousands of stars, creating a database that fueled astronomical research for generations. She wasn't just a computer. She was a discoverer of cosmic proportions. But her most profound impact may have been terrestrial. In an era when science was an exclusive club for wealthy, university-educated men, she kicked the door open. Edward Pickering, having struck gold with his impulsive decision, went on to hire dozens of other women, creating a team that became famously and sometimes derisively known as Pickering's harem. Fleming was the first. She proved that women were not only capable of this meticulous scientific work, but that they could excel at it. She was eventually put in charge of this team, mentoring and supervising the next wave of female astronomers, including giants like Annie Jump Cannon and Henrietta Leavitt. She became a leader and a role model, cultivating a space for female intellect to flourish within the staunchly male walls of Harvard. She demonstrated that the ability to discern the secrets of the universe was not tied to gender, but to diligence, curiosity, and a sharp, open mind. Despite her monumental contributions, her story is also a poignant reminder of the injustices of her time. She was never given the full recognition she deserved. While Pickering became famous, she remained a salaried employee, her pay a fraction of that of her male counterparts. She was never granted an official academic appointment by Harvard University. The title of Curator of Astronomical Photographs she received in 1899 was a nod to her importance, but it fell short of recognizing her as the scientist she truly was. The world was willing to use her mind, but not to grant her the status that came with it. It's a classic Hidden Figures narrative, a story of a brilliant mind whose contributions were systemically undervalued because of her gender and social class. She was a giant, forced to stand in the shadows of the men who relied on her work. Her journey from a maid's quarters to a curator's office, from dusting furniture to discovering new worlds, is more than just a fascinating piece of scientific history. It's a powerful testament to the boundless, unpredictable nature of human potential. It's a story that challenges us to look past our own prejudices, to question the arbitrary lines we draw based on background, education, or social standing. Genius doesn't care about credentials. It can be found in a classroom, a laboratory, or, as Williamina Fleming proved, while quietly and efficiently going about one's work, waiting for an opportunity to shine.
Her rewritten map of the stars ultimately did more than reorder the heavens. It served as a powerful, enduring argument for reevaluating the potential of every mind here on Earth.